Shepard Middle School in Deerfield, Illinois, has been the subject of some controversy. You see, there's been a school board meeting in which it was basically packed with degenerates. But let's rewind, okay? So, what actually happened? Well, several girls complained that there was a boy in their locker room, and so they refused to change in front of him, to basically get dressed in front of him. And their response to the boy in the locker room caused outrage amongst some on the far left, but who also worked inside the school system. And so, Assistant Superintendent for Student Services, Joanna Ford, Assistant Principal, Kathy Van Treese, and Director for Student Services, Ginger Logeman, apparently took these girls into the locker room and then forced them to change in front of the boy. So says the parents of those girls, that the girls were reprimanded for basically not being inclusive enough and for not saying that the boy was a girl, and then forced to engage in this. Now, apparently the principal, Rob Wegley, further told one of the girls that any male student who identifies as female is allowed to change in any bathroom or use any locker room at the school. So what you see here is obviously just the ideology of the day, but it's being forcibly lived by, I'm just going to say, the children. And I think that's what's so sad about so much of this, is that, it's one thing for people to have just a ridiculous and absurd and irrational worldview. But the trouble is that when those people reach positions of power in our society, or even in their small pocket, that it is the most vulnerable in our society, that is our children, who end up having to sort of suffer this, or literally suffer the consequences of that, and of the collective cowardice of people who refuse to speak, to speak out, to correct it. And so at this school board where parents recounted what had happened to their daughters, well, you had all these different, just wild kind of degenerate people dressed in attire that no reasonable person would ever go to a school board meeting in, because well, I don't have a good explanation for why it is that when a man decides that he's a woman, he has to dress like a prostitute. I don't know, but it is like they sort of want to embrace the caricature of the worst expression of distorted femininity, I suppose. I'm just gonna go with that. But you saw lots of that at the school board meeting, school boards, and that's the thing. I've talked before about how if you get involved in your community in the sort of most local way, it's where you can have the most influence, as opposed to, if you broaden that to outright to the national, well, you become a very tiny voice, and it's very difficult to achieve effective change. But if you're involved in something like a school board, it's quite possible for you to have a much louder voice and change things, if only because people don't like to engage in discourse, never mind actually, fight over something. And so that's what I think you have in so many of these different school boards. You have these different, transgender, transvestites, and so on,
My name is Charlie Friedman. My pronouns are they, he.
who show up and they're loud and they're obnoxious and they just sort of bully people into doing whatever it is that they want. And so that's why I urge so many people to get involved in your local communities. But this crowd, they were defending the boys' so-called right to have girls change in front of him.
When we see a 13-year-old student who's undergoing this type of thing, how are they feeling? That's what we really need to be considering.
It's kind of interesting, an interesting distortion of what we know as rights. Like, no, you don't have the right to insert yourself into a position where people make pornography in front of you. That's not actually a right. And it's just this, I don't know, disturbing inversion of order. So where the girls would have the right to their own private space, which is always uncomfortable anyway, even with the same sex around you, like, I don't know of anyone like in high school who actually was comfortable with that. But in any case, it that's as it was with you know, the same-sex gathering. Then you insert someone from the other sex. How on earth would you expect that not to be seriously disturbing? I don't know. And obviously, it's somewhat threatening as well because of the disparity, not just in genitalia, but also in strength and ability. Let's not, you know, mince words here. Men and women are not the same. And physically speaking, men are, I mean, the difference in strength is just extreme, right? And so you then have the school is claiming, well, there was no actual problem. There was no actual problem. The parents are just blowing it out of control. And this is why, because we have 5 private stalls. We installed 5 private stalls. Now, there's no picture or video of this, like whether there's just a curtain or a door. I don't know. I do know that 5 stalls isn't enough for all the girls, though. Right? No, it's not. It's enough for 5, which is not all of the girls in the class. So why is it that you're trying to force all these different girls to get changed in front of the one boy when you have 5 private stalls? Why can the boy who's confused not go into his own little private stall somewhere, or an, you know, staff bathroom or something? Well, because we have this disordered sense of prioritization based upon victimhood, right? He's the victim because he's confused, right? He's the victim because he claims to be trans. And so therefore, it's okay for him to, you know, make 30 girls uncomfortable and to place them in a situation where they're basically being abused, rather than making one person uncomfortable by putting him by himself. When he's uncomfortable and confused either way. But that's the sort of weirdly disordered, we're calling it morality. It's not moral. But that's the sort of moral code that these people are going by. And one of the trans-identifying men, like actually a guy, who showed up at the school board meeting, said that we should have more concern for the boy who finally feels authentic in the girls' locker room. I don't care if he feels authentic or not. I don't care if a pedophile wants to go into the school and go into the locker room and say, well, this is where I feel authentic. Like, yeah, I bet you do. Not the point. It has nothing to do with the fact that you feel authentic. You are not in your correct place because you are not actually a girl. So you're not being authentic to your true self because your true self is male. I mean, sometimes when I report on this, I do these videos, I feel like I'm just saying very obvious things over and over again. And to some degree I am, but also it shocks others because they're not used to hearing it anymore, because they've been living in this just chaotic world where people pretend like they don't know that this is actually a boy and that it doesn't make sense to put him in with 30 girls, which is why we separated the locker rooms to begin with, right? Back when we could use our reason, I suppose. And that's what's happening, is instead you're engaging in what amounts to a type of sexual abuse of these girls for the sake of appeasing the boy who thinks that he's being authentic, but actually is denying who he actually is fundamentally, and is insisting that everybody else do the same. And that's assuming that he actually is transgender, that it is assuming that he does actually have gender dysphoria, and that he's not actually just wanting to watch girls undress because he's attracted to them sexually. Who knows which is the case? I can't say. But what I can say is that a school board and people who are charged with protecting children ought to actually do their jobs and protect children. Did you enjoy that? Because if so, maybe your friends would too. Please don't forget to share it. The algorithms aren't going to work in my favor, so I'd appreciate your help. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe. I have links in the description showing you different ways that you can support my work and find more of what I do. Thank you.